March 17th, 1898. Prospect of gold has a way of making a man feel 10 feet tall. And today I reckon I'm standing even taller. Luck must have been sitting on my shoulder last night, guiding my hand as I haggled with that scraggly old-timer at the Yukon Rose. The bar was thick with smoke, and the whiskey tasted like it'd been watered down twice over. But none of that mattered once he pulled out the map. Worn at the edges, marked with stains and creases, it was the kind of thing you dismiss if you didn't know better. But I knew. I saw the glint in his eye when he laid it on the table. A sly look that told me there was more to that piece of paper than just old ink and tattered parchment. I had to play it cool. Act like I wasn't already dreaming of the riches it promised. A couple of drinks, a few stories exchanged, and before the night was over, the map was mine. Practically a steal. The old-timer warned me of the risks, of course. "Fools die out there chasing dreams," he said. But I ain't no fool. And with Simpson by my side, I feel like there's nothing that can stop us. As we set out this morning, the air's crisp enough to bite, but I barely feel it. I got my pack on my back, shovel strapped tight, and that map tucked safe in my breast pocket, close to my heart where it belongs. Simpson pads along beside me, his tail wagging like he knows something big's about to happen. I give him a scratch behind the ears, and he looks up at me with those amber eyes full of trust and loyalty. He's been with me through thick and thin, and if there's gold out there, he'll be the first to know it. The sun's just starting to peek over the mountains, casting long shadows across the snow-covered ground. Every crunch of my boots feels like the start of a new adventure. Every step brings me closer to the fortune that's waiting out there in the wild. They say the Yukon's a harsh mistress, but today, she feels like a friend. March 18th, 1898. We've made camp just before the tree line, where the land stretches out wide and open, like it's inviting us to take in all its beauty. The fire crackles, sending sparks up into the night sky, where the stars burn brighter than I've ever seen. Out here, away from the towns and their yellow lamps, the heavens are something else entirely. It's like the stars are close enough to touch, scattered across the velvet sky in patterns that'll make you believe in stories, in the old tales of gods and heroes. Samson's curled up beside me, his coat shining in the firelight, and his ears perk up every now and then at the sounds of the night. There's a peace to this place, a stillness that settles in your bones. The air is crisp, but the fire's warmth and the layers of furs keep the cold at bay. I lean back, resting against my pack, and gaze out across the valley. Then I see them, down below where the land dips and the shadows stretch long, a pack of his ancestors, a pack of wolves. Their sleek forms moving like ghosts through the snow. They're hunting, stalking a moose that's too slow or too old to escape their cunning. It's nature's dance, beautiful and brutal all at once. The wolves move with such purpose, their breath steaming in the night air as they circle their prey, their eyes glowing with hunger and instinct. The moose puts up a fight, powerful and deliberate. But this is a tango they've danced many a time, and there's a part of me that knows how this is going to end. It's a sight that stirs something deep in me, a reminder of the wilderness that lives in this land, and the bones of everything that walks upon it. Out here, there's no room for softness, but there's a kind of raw beauty in that truth, a beauty that I've come to respect. The wolves bring down the moose, their howls echoing through the valley, a haunting song of victory that sends a shiver down my spine. But it's not fear I feel. It's all. To witness the cycle of life so close, to see it play out under the same stars that watch over us, it's humbling. Samson shifts, resting his head on my leg, and I reach down to scratch his ears. His trust in me is unwavering, just like mine in him. The fire crackles and the wolves' howls fade into the distance as the night settles back into its quiet rhythm. I breathe in the cold air, filled with the scent of pine and earth. I feel a deep contentment. Soon, sleep will take us both, and we'll dream under these stars, the fire keeping the chill away, and the promise of tomorrow shining just as bright as those distant lights in the sky. There's gold to be found, but tonight, I'm rich with the beauty of this land, the companionship of my dog, and the knowledge that out here, under the vastness of the Yukon night, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. March 19th, 1898. The morning started off calm enough, the sky painted in soft shades of pink and orange as the sun crept over the horizon. We broke camp early, eager to make good time on the trail. The map's been whispering to me, promising riches just over the next ridge, and I feel that familiar pull in my gut, the one that says we're getting close. Samson's got a spring in his step too, his nose to the ground, picking up scents only he can understand. The trail took us deeper into the woods, where the trees grow tall and thick, their branches reaching out like ancient arms. The quiet here is different, heavy, like the forest is holding its breath. I was just thinking how still everything was when Samson stopped dead in his tracks, his ears pricked up and his body tense. I followed his gaze, and that's when I saw her. A mother bear, big as life, standing just a few paces ahead on the trail. She had 2 cubs with her, tiny things still learning to navigate this wild world. They were nibbling on roots, unaware of us at first, but the mother wasn't so easily distracted. Her eyes locked on mine, and I felt the weight of that stare, ancient, powerful, and full of warning I didn't need to hear twice. She let out a low, rumbling growl, the sound that vibrated through the air and set my heart racing. I could feel the tension crackling like lightning, the space between us shrinking as she took a step forward. It wasn't an attack, not yet, or like a reminder of who ruled this part of the woods. Samson stood his ground beside me, his body rigid, eyes focused, but he didn't bark or move. He just stood there, calm and steady, like he knew that panicking would only make things worse. The mother bear took another step. This time, it was more than just a warning. She charged forward, her massive paws pounding the earth, but it wasn't full force. Just enough to make it clear she was ready to defend her cubs if need be. My breath caught in my throat, and for a split second, I thought this might be the end of us. The thought to reach for my rifle never even occurred to me. But Samson didn't flinch. He stood tall, not a growl, not a whimper, just that steady, unyielding stare. I don't know if it was the strength of his stance or the calm he radiated, but something in that moment shifted. The bear stopped short, her massive form looming over us, her breath hot and heavy in the cold morning air. For what felt like an eternity, we all just stood there, locked in a silent standoff. Then, as suddenly as she charged, she backed off. She huffed, a sound of resignation maybe, and turned to nudge her cubs. They toddled after her, glancing back at us with curiosity, but the mother had made up her mind. She led them off the trail, disappearing into the underbrush with only the rustle of leaves to mark their passing. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. my heart hammering in my chest. Samson finally moved, his muscles relaxing as he trotted over me, nudging my hand with his nose like it was no big thing. I knelt down, running a hand through his thick fur, and whispered a quiet thanks. We stood there for a moment longer, listening to the forest return to its quiet, the tension draining away. When we finally moved on, I couldn't help but feel a little more in tune with the wild around us, like we passed some sort of test. The Yukon is a dangerous place, no doubt about that. But today it feels like we've earned our place in it, even if just for a little while longer. The map still calls, the promise of gold pulling us onward. But for now, I'm just grateful to be alive, to have Samson by my side, and to know that today, the wilderness chose to let us walk away. March 20th, 1898. It's funny how quickly the landscape can change out here. One minute you're trudging through thick woods, every step a struggle, and the next you're standing on the banks of a river so clear and pure that it looks like something out of a dream. We followed the map's directions down a narrow ravine, the air grown colder and the light dimming as the trees closed in around us. Then, just as the day was starting to wane, we broke through to a small clearing, and there it was. The river. Exactly where the old-timer's map said it would be. The water flowed like a quiet power, its surface glistening in the late afternoon sun. I could feel the excitement buzzing in my veins like the hum of bees in summer. This was it. The spot where fortunes were made or lost, where men's dreams either soared or shattered. I dropped my pack, my hands shaking with anticipation as I pulled out a pan, the one piece of gear that never let me down. Samson, sensing the importance of the moment, sat beside me, his eyes fixed on the water as I waded in. The cold bit into my skin, but I barely noticed, the focus narrowing to the task at hand. I scooped up a panful of gravel and silt, my heart pounding in my chest as I began to familiar swirl in the water, letting the heavier material settle at the bottom. It didn't take long. In fact, it happened so fast it felt almost unreal. There, glinting at the bottom of the pan, was the unmistakable flash of gold. Not just a few flakes, but nuggets. Big, fat pieces of gold that shone like the sun trapped in stone. My breath caught, and for a moment I just stared, unable to believe my eyes. But it was real as the cold water and the wind that whipped through the trees. I let out a shout, the sound echoing off the canyon walls, and Samson barked in excitement, leaping around the riverbank. My hands moved on their own, scooping and swirling, each panful revealing more gold, more of that precious metal that men had killed for, died for, and crossed half the world to find. And here it was, right in my hands, more than I'd ever dared to dream of. By the time the sun began to dip behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the river, I had a pile of gold that would make any man's fortune. I sat back on my heels, breathless and grinning like a damn fool, my hands trembling with the weight of what I'd found. Samson came over, his tail wagging furiously, and I ruffled his fur, laughing at the sheer joy of the movement. This was it. The moment every prospector lives for. The dream that keeps you going through the long, hard days and bitter nights. The map had led me true. And now I was sitting on a fortune that would change my life forever. As I watched the last light of day dance on the river, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. To the old-timer for his map, to the Yukon for its bounty, and to Samson, my steadfast companion through it all. Tonight we'll sleep under the stars once more. But this time we'll do it knowing that we struck gold. Real, solid, life-changing gold. And with that thought, the cold, the hunger, the dangers, they all seem like a small price to pay for the promise of a future as bright as those golden nuggets shining in the fading light. March 20th, 1898, same evening. The excitement of the day still buzzes in my veins as I sit by the fire, the gold safely tucked away in my pack. The night's falling quickly. The sky above us is deepening into a vast expanse of stars, but I barely notice. My mind keeps replaying the moment I struck gold, the feeling of those nuggets heavy in my hand, the thrill of knowing my luck had finally turned. Samson lies nearby, his usual spot just inside the tent, where he can keep an eye on me and the other on the wild around us. But something's off. At first, I don't pay much mind to it. Just a flicker of movement out in the corner of my eye as I prepare for bed. But then I notice it again. Samson, usually so alert and confident, is acting strange. Instead of settling down like he usually does, he's pacing around the tent, his head low and his ears flattened against his skull. It's behavior I've never seen from him before. This dog faced off against a bear, for heaven's sake. I call his name, expecting him to come over for a scratch or to settle by the fire, but he doesn't. Instead, he slinks away, moving with a kind of nervous energy that puts me on edge. He retreats to the far corner of the tent, curling up tight, his body pressed against the canvas as if he's trying to disappear into it. His eyes, usually bright and alert, are wide and anxious, and he won't meet my gaze. "Samson," I call. Softer this time, but he just whimpers. A low, pitiful sound that makes my spine tingle. I kneel beside him, running a hand through his fur, but he flinches, pulling away as if even my touch is too much to bear. His whole body's trembling, and there's a look in his eyes that I've never seen before. Fear. This ain't like him. Samson's faced down bears, wolves, and the brutal cold of the Yukon without so much as a second thought. But now he's cowering like something's got him spooked beyond reason. I sit back on my heels, my heart beginning to pound with a different kind of urgency. I scan the campsite, the firelight casting flickering shadows against the trees, but there's nothing that I can see anyway, that would explain this sudden terror. The night feels different now, the earlier sense of triumph and security slipping away, replaced by a gnawing unease. The forest around us, once quiet and serene, seems to press in. The darkness thicker. The sounds of the night, usually so familiar, now strange and unsettling. I listen hard, trying to pick up on what Samson might be sensing, but all I hear is the crackle of the fire and then the distant rush of the river. Still, I can't shake the feeling that something's out there, something that's got Samson on edge. The hairs on the back of my neck are standing up, and I reach for the rifle, laying it across my lap as I sit down by the fire. My eyes keep darting to the shadows, my ears straining for any sound that might explain Samson's behavior. I try to reassure him, my voice low and calm, but it's clear that what's ever got him spooked isn't going away anytime soon. I've trusted Samson with my life more times than I can count, and if he says something's wrong, I believe him. He might have struck gold today, but out here in the wild, that gold means nothing if we can't make it out alive. So I keep the fire burning a little brighter tonight, the rifle close at hand and my senses sharp. As I lie down, Sampson remains curled in the corner, his eyes wide and unblinking, watching the tent's entrance like he's waiting for something or someone to come through. And as I close my eyes, sleep doesn't come easy. There's a feeling in the pit of my stomach, a cold dread I can't shake. Whatever's out there, whatever has Sampson so scared, I just hope the fire, the rifle, and a bit of luck are enough to keep it at bay till morning. March 21st, 1898. Morning couldn't come fast enough. The night dragged on, thick with tension, every sound in the dark amplified by the silence that followed. Sampson never settled, his eyes wide and ears pricked, watching the tent's entrance like a sentinel. I drifted in and out of uneasy sleep, clutching my rifle and listening to the crackle of the fire, which seemed to burn down faster than usual, leaving the tent darker and colder with every passing hour. When the first light of dawn finally filtered through the canvas, I felt a wave of relief, though it was tempered by the lingering unease from the night before. Sampson, still curled up in the corner, seemed reluctant to move. It wasn't until I started to pack up that he finally stirred, but even then, his steps were cautious, his eyes darting nervously. I opened the tent flap to step outside, and that's when I saw them. Massive cat prints, deeper and clear in the soft earth just outside the tent. They were unmistakable, each pad perfectly outlined, far too large to belong to an ordinary cougar or lynx. The sight of them sent a chill down my spine. Whatever had been prowling around us in the night was no ordinary predator. It was something bigger, stronger, and likely hungrier than anything I'd ever encountered before. Next to the prints, by my scattered equipment, I found something even more unsettling. A pile of crap, fresh and steaming in the cold morning air. The message was clear. We're in its territory, and it wasn't afraid to let us know. Sampson approached the prints cautiously, sniffing them with a low whine before backing away, his tail tucked between his legs. My heart pounded as I scanned the tree line, half expecting to see the creature watching us. But there was nothing, just the empty woods, as quiet and still as they'd been the day before. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that whatever had left those prints was still out there, eyeing us up. The day went by in a haze of nervous energy. I worked quickly, my hands trembling as I panned the river, my eyes constantly darting back to the trees. Sampson was on edge the whole time, his ears flickering at every sound, his body tense and ready to bolt at the slightest sign of danger. The goal that had brought me so much joy yesterday now felt like a burden, a weight that tied me to this place when every instinct screamed at me to leave. But I stayed, driven by that stubborn streak that had gotten me this far. The hours passed, the sun climbing high and then starting its descent. But the unease never left. Every rustle in the bushes, every snap of a twig, sent my heart racing, and by the time the sun began to set, I knew we were in for another long night. As dusk settled over the camp, turning the sky a deep shade of purple, the woods grew quiet. Too quiet. The usual sounds of birds and insects faded away, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. Sampson stayed close to me, his nose to the air, sniffing anxiously as we prepared for the night. I built the fire higher than before, its flames casting long shadows across the clearing, but even the warmth couldn't chase away the growing sense of dread. Then, just as the light of day faded and the stars began to peek through the twilight, we heard it. A scream, piercing and inhuman, echoing through the valley. It was a sound that froze the blood in my veins, a high-pitched wail that rose and fell, followed by a deep guttural roar that seemed to shake the very ground beneath us. Samson bolted for the tent, his courage finally breaking under the weight of that terrible sound. I didn't hesitate to follow my boy, diving into the tent and pulling the flap shut behind me. My heart pounded my chest, every nerve on edge as the echoes of the scream lingered in the night air. Samson curled up tight in the corner, his body trembling, and I crouched beside him, clutching the rifle with white-knuckled hands. The night seemed to stretch on forever, every second marked by the pounding of my heart and the faint crackle of the fire, as it slowly died outside the tent. I listened for any sign that the creature was approaching, any rustle of leaves or snap of branches, but all I could hear was the silence, a heavy, oppressive silence that pressed in from all sides. Whatever was out there, it was close. Too close. And as the hours dragged by, I realized that there was nothing to do but wait, huddled in that tent with Samson, hoping that the fire and the thin walls of canvas would be enough to keep the darkness at bay. I didn't sleep that night, and I'm not sure Samson did either. We just lay there side by side, our breaths shallow and quick, waiting for the dawn to come and chase away the horrors of the night. All I could think of was how things had changed quickly. How the promise of gold had turned into a nightmare, and now the wilderness, with all its beauty, could so easily become an ugly terror. The screams and roars quickly faded into the distance, but the fear lingered, a cold knot in my stomach that wouldn't let go. And as I lay there in the dark, listening to the night, I couldn't help but wonder if it was worth it. If anything was worth facing whatever had claimed this land as its own. March 24th, 1898. I hadn't needed more convincing. As soon as the first light of dawn broke through the trees, painting the forest pale shades of gold and green, I knew we had to leave. The gold I'd panned now felt like a curse. Its weight in my pack, a constant reminder of the danger we'd courted by staying here. Samson was up before me, pacing anxiously outside the tent, his eyes scanning the tree line as if expecting that terrible creature to come crashing through at any moment. We packed quickly, taking only what was essential. The thought of staying another night in this cursed place was unthinkable. I secured the gold carefully, not daring to leave behind the fortune that brought us up here in the first place. But it felt hollow now, like ashes in my hands. The rest of our supplies were hastily thrown together, and within the hour, we were on the move, leaving behind the river and the sight that had both blessed and cursed us. The forest seemed different on the way back. The trees taller, the shadows longer, and the silence heavier. Each step felt like a march through enemy territory, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Samson was on edge too. His ears twitching, his head snapping to the side at every rustle in the underbrush. It wasn't long before I caught the first glimpse. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A flash of tawny fur just at the edge of my vision. I turned, my heart pounding, but it was gone, blending into the shadows like smoke. We kept moving, but the sense of dread grew with every step. I saw it again and again, each time a little more closer, a little clearer. A gigantic cat, sleek and powerful, its front end heavily muscled, its coat a blend of grays and browns that allowed it to melt into the forest around it. And then those fangs, long, curved, and deadly like something out of a nightmare. It was stalking us, no doubt about that. Keeping its distance, but always there, just at the edge of the trees, its amber eyes watching our every move. Samson knew it too. He didn't bark or growl, he just kept close, his body low to the ground, his every muscle tense and ready to spring. We were the intruders in this territory, and it was making sure we knew it. But it never attacked. Whether it was the fire the day before, the rifle I kept slung across my back, or some other instinct, it kept its distance. A shadowy guardian that seemed more intent on herding us out than tearing us apart. I didn't let my guard down for a second, though, and I kept a brisk pace, eager to put as much distance between us and that creature as possible. Just when I thought we might have seen the last of it, we stumbled upon something that made my blood run colder than the springs around us. At first, I thought it was a man, sprawled out in the small clearing, his body broken and torn. But as we approached, the horror of what we were seeing sank in. It wasn't a man, not by a long shot. The thing lying in the clearing was massive, covered in thick, dark fur. Its limbs were long and powerful, its hands almost human but too large, too brutal in their shape. Its face, or what was left of it, was a grotesque blend of ape and something else, something primitive and terrifying. It had been savaged, its body ripped apart in a way that no man or other normal predator could have managed. Deep gashes like those made by enormous claws crisscrossed its torso, and its throat had been torn open, likely by those same saber fangs that had stalked us through the trees. Samson let out a low whine, his nose wrinkling at the scent of blood and death. I felt bile rise in my throat, a cold sweat breaking out across my skin. Whatever this creature was, some relic of a time before man, some beast that wasn't supposed to exist, it had been hunted down and killed by that thing that had followed us. I didn't stay to examine it further. Whatever this place was, whatever strange and terrible creatures called it home, it wasn't meant for us. We had taken what we'd came for, and now we're being allowed to leave. But it was clear that we were not welcome. Not really. The rest of the journey back to civilization was a blur of anxiety and exhaustion. The further we traveled from that cursed river, the lighter the air felt, and the more I began to feel that we'd actually make it out alive. By the time we saw the first signs of human life, tracks in the dirt, the distant sounds of voices, Samson's pace had quickened, his tail wagging for the first time since we left that damn place behind. When we finally stumbled into the outskirts of the nearest town, I felt like a man who'd been given a second chance at life. The gold was still in my pack, but I knew I'd never go back for more, no matter how much was left behind. Some things aren't worth the risk, no matter how shiny they might be. I made a vow then and there as I stood on the threshold of civilization with Samson at my side. I would never return to that place. We had been granted our lives, and that was worth more than all the gold in the Yukon. Whatever lived out there, deep in those woods, had let us go once. I wouldn't be testing its mercy a second time.